We all knew Jared Cannonier versus Gregory Rodrigues was going to be an absolute war, right? Surely we didn't expect anything else. That's pretty much all that Jared Cannonier is ever a part of. In 2024 alone, he was in a borderline Fight of the Year contender against Khaos. Gregory Rodrigues has been in some absolute dogfights, was on a 3-fight win streak. This was a banger guaranteed, and that rings true in the aftermath, but there had to be a winner, and it was Jared Cannonier as the Killer Gorilla takes down RoboCop. This was an absolutely massive victory for the career of the 40-year-old former title challenger, Jared the Killer Gorilla Cannonier. He bounces back from an 0-2 year in 2024 with a victory over the unranked but surging Gregory Rodrigues. He halts his win streak, he halts his momentum, and more importantly, Cannonier holds his spot amongst the elite of the elite in this absolutely on fire right now middleweight division. This fight was unbelievable from start to finish. Round number 1, Gregory Rodrigues drops Jared Cannonier twice with massive shots. How that man makes middleweight is beyond me. He is a beast of a man. He looked so much bigger than Jared Cannonier in this fight. And let us not forget, Jared Cannonier started his UFC career at heavyweight. But Cannonier was able to weather the early storm, bounce back very well in round 2. Round 3 was a little bit closer, but I still gave it to Jared Cannonier, as did all 3 of the judges on the scorecard. So going into the championship rounds, and specifically round 4, Cannonier was up 2-1, and much of that was in part to the knockdown that Cannonier had at the very end of round 3 with a short elbow in the clinch that put Rodrigues down to the mat. And he was absolutely saved by the bell. If there were 5 more seconds, maybe even less, Cannonier gets out of there with a 3rd round TKO. But instead, he gets the 4th round TKO, and it only took 21 seconds as Jared Cannonier in his corner in between rounds 3 and 4 realized how hurt that they had Gregory Rodrigues. Cannonier smelt blood in the water and pounced for the kill. Didn't give Rodrigues a second to breathe throughout those 21 seconds of action in that 4th round. The first time that Rodrigues had ever smelt championship rounds before, and it showed that there are just levels to this game. Jared Cannonier absolutely still belongs in the discussions of the best middleweights on planet Earth today. And yeah, he went 0-2 in 2024, but let's peel the curtain back on that a little. It was against Khaos where he won 1 round on 2 scorecards and 2 rounds on another judge's scorecard. Yes, Cannonier had big moments in that fight against him where he got knocked down, got close to being finished, but he rallied back in that one and gave Khaos all that he had to offer in one of the best fights of 2024. Khaos, mind you, has not lost in the UFC to date. And the other fight in 2024 was against Nassourdine Imavov in a main event back in June at UFC Louisville, where Cannonier was up 2-1 on the judges' scorecards heading into the 4th round before he got stopped by Imavov in what many say is a controversial stoppage. And even if you don't think it was controversial, look at where Nassourdine Imavov is present day. He's coming off of a knockout victory over former 2-time champion Israel Adesanya and is currently number 1 ranked in the world right now. And before the bad 2024, Cannonier had beaten Sean Strickland, who was a former middleweight champion, and Marvin Vettori, a former title challenger. And now he beats a surging, way younger than him, 8 years younger, even though Gregory Rodrigues looks about 8 years older than Cannonier. And what a performance, what a moment. You could see in the aftermath what this meant to Jared Cannonier, the emotion. He had a teammate on this same card that got a big win earlier on the night that we'll touch on here in just a minute. So I feel so happy for Jared Cannonier. For Gregory Rodrigues, it's nothing to hang your hat on. You're just 32 years old, and this was just a fight that didn't make sense. If we're talking rankings-wise, I'm not saying Gregory couldn't have won the fight. Look at the success he had in round number 1. But just from a jump, this type of jump, I should say, all the way in to not top 15, not top 10, but number 7 former title challenger Jared Cannonier just felt a little bit unwarranted and a little bit too early, and I think it showed here. And I feel like I just keep repeating the same exact thing over and over and over again because this is the third straight week of middleweight main events. So I'm not going to talk about it as much right now, but the state of this division is in the best state it has ever been before. So the quick rundown in case you're new here and haven't heard all of my thoughts on this division, or if you just want a quick recap in general, 2 weeks ago at UFC Saudi Arabia, we saw the then ranked number 2 Israel Adesanya take on the then ranked number 5 Nassourdine Imavov. Imavov would knock out Israel Adesanya in that fight and launch himself into the top 3. He's on a 4-fight win streak now, all 4 wins against top 10 ranked opponents, 2 of them by finish. The following week, last week at UFC 312, we would see Dricus du Plessis defend his title for the second consecutive time and improve to 2-0 against Sean Strickland. Because of that loss, Sean Strickland moved from number 1 to number 2, and Imavov went from number 2 to number 1. And yes, if you ask me, Nassourdine Imavov is a true-cut number 1 contender for Dricus du Plessis' middleweight throne. However, there's also another number 1 contender in this division right now, and it's Khamzat Chimaev, the undefeated phenom who's coming off of an absolute demolition over former champion Robert Whittaker back at UFC 308. Then we had this fight here with Jared Cannonier sitting at number 7, taking out the unranked but surging Gregory Rodrigues, so he will hold his spot. Next week at UFC Seattle, we have Brendan Allen taking on Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. Brendan currently sits at number 9 in the division, and Fluffy stands at number 12 and is on a massive win streak right now. And then in March, we have the number 8 ranked Marvin Vettori taking on the number 10 ranked Roman Dolidze in a rematch a couple of years in the making. The entire top 15 and top 10 of this middleweight division is going into battle in the first 3 months of the year. That is absolutely amazing. Rarely do we get to see all of this type of movement for a division, and especially in a division like middleweight that has had its spots over the course of the 30-plus year history of the UFC of being quite stale, with long championship reigns from Israel Adesanya and Anderson Silva. But now the wheels are churning. Everybody is fighting. Everybody wants a crack to get in there against Dricus du Plessis or to earn their right to fight for whoever becomes the middleweight champion in 2025. So now, instead of me trying to break down all the matchups, I want to open it up to you all. And so the discussion is simple. Tell me your matchmaking for the UFC middleweight division, because now we finally get a break. We had 3 straight middleweight main events. I talked about all of the action. Imavov finishing Israel Adesanya, Dricus du Plessis defending his belt against Strickland, Cannonier taking out Gregory Rodrigues, Nassourdine Imavov is ready for a title. Khamzat Chimaev is ready for a title. Next week, Brendan Allen versus Anthony Hernandez. Next month, Roman Dolidze, Marvin Vettori. How do you see all of these matchups going, the ones that we haven't seen yet, the 2 that I just mentioned, and how do you take all of the winners and losers of the past 3 weeks and pair them all together right now in this middleweight division? Tell me who you think Dricus du Plessis will defend his title against next, and whoever it isn't between Nassourdine and Khamzat Chimaev, tell me who they're going to fight next. Tell me who Jared Cannonier is going to fight next. Give me your predictions for Brendan Allen, Anthony Hernandez. Give me your predictions for Marvin Vettori, Roman Dolidze, and everything else in between for the 185-pound weight class. And now that we are done talking about the main event of UFC Vegas 102, let's talk about some other big results before we finish off today's discussion. The biggest storyline of the weekend for me happened in the co-main event of UFC Vegas 102 as Youssef Zalal defeated the number 10 ranked featherweight in the world, Calvin Kattar. From October of 2020 until August 2022, Youssef Zalal would go 0-3 with 1 draw in the UFC, leading to his release from the promotion. But since then, he has won 7 fights in a row, 6 of them by finish, rejoined the UFC and went 4-0 in the promotion, 3 of them by submission, and now a decision victory, very convincing, may I add, over the 10th ranked featherweight in the world. Come on, man, how can you not feel good for this guy who is still just 28 years old? Less than 3 years ago, many fans, maybe even including Youssef himself, may have felt that his career was done in terms of being an elite level fighter, but now look at him 2.5 years later, Come Tuesday morning, he's going to be a top 10 fighter, or very close to being a top 10 fighter in the world at 145 pounds. And he did it by beating Calvin Kattar at his own game. He outboxed and outstruck him for 3 rounds. Yes, the third round belonged to Calvin Kattar, but still, it was a pretty close one in comparison to total number of strikes landed. But rounds 1 and 2 were all Youssef Zalal en route to his 4th consecutive UFC victory and 7th consecutive overall. And while I did love and respect his call out of Brian Ortega in the aftermath of this fight, I do believe that Ortega will be making the move up to 155 pounds after losing at Noche UFC to Diego Lopez. But if you ask me, I think there's a better matchup out there for Youssef Zalal in his next fight, and it is against someone who beat the same exact fighter that Youssef did at UFC Vegas 102. It is Aljamain Sterling, who has had 2 fights in the featherweight division since coming up in weight after being a bantamweight champion. He beat Calvin Kattar by dominating him at UFC 300, then had a very, very close fight with the undefeated Movsar Evloev toward the end of 2024, where he would lose. So he's coming off of a loss, but shares the same victory as Youssef Zalal. It would be number 8 versus potentially number 10. Wherever Zalal ends up on Tuesday morning, he's going to be in the top 15. I think you do him versus Aljamain Sterling next. Edmen Shahbazyan continues to be one of the best one-round fighters in UFC history as he finishes Dylan Budka just 1 minute and 35 seconds into their bout with one of the most vicious right hands of 2025 so far. The thud, the impact, the sound of this was nasty.
Oh, that's it. Big right hand by Shahbazyan.
However, we all know the story of Edmen Shahbazyan, who was pushed much too far, much too soon in his career back in 2020, where he was launched into a fight against a ranked opponent at that time, Derek Brunson, and he would get humbled very, very quickly. And while he hasn't necessarily bounced back fully from those 3 straight losses between August of 2020 and November of 2021, he is now, in my opinion, coming into his all, and he's inching his prime. Let us not forget, he is still just 27 years old. That is how early on he got pushed by the UFC. In hindsight, a pretty bad decision by the promotion. They threw him in much too soon, similar to how they did with Darren Till. And as a result of that early push, Edmen has not won back-to-back fights since July and November of 2019, where he beat Jack Marshman and Brad Tavares. But to be fair, while I do believe he was pushed much too soon, much too quickly, the losses? Derek Brunson, Jack Hermanson, Nassourdine Imavov, Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, are you kidding me? And then his loss in 2024 was against the all-time leader in submissions in middleweight history, Jared Mearshart. And oh, by the way, he submitted Edmen Shahbazyan, but not before nearly being finished in the first round of their fight. So call me crazy, but I still believe in the potential of Edmen Shahbazyan. I still believe that he can be a top 15 player in this middleweight division. It's just a matter of time. Only 27, about 1, 2, 3 years away from truly being in his prime years, as most fighters do around that 28 through 32 age range. I think Edmen has potential left in the tank. As I mentioned in the main event, Jared Cannonier had a teammate on this card that had a big-time finish as well, and that was Jose Delgado, who improved to 9-1 as a professional. All 9 of his wins are by way of stoppage. 5 knockouts, 4 submissions, 26 years young, and he finishes Connor Matthews 2 minutes and 58 seconds into their bout. He is on a 6-fight win streak dating back to November of 2023. This man is a very legitimate prospect, someone to keep your eyes on in the 145-pound division as we go further into 2025 and approach 2026. 40 never looked so good. Angela Hill and Jared Cannonier both got huge victories at UFC Vegas 102. Angela Hill had her 6th UFC fight go to a split decision, and for the first time in those 6, she got the nod on the judges' scorecards. She gets the victory over the surging Ketlen Souza, who was on a 2-fight win streak heading into this. And at 40 years old, Angela Hill has won 5 of her last 7 bouts, and the only losses, Tabitha Ricci and Mackenzie Dern. It's to 2 of the best women at 115 pounds. And for Angela Hill, I think it's actually pretty easy to matchmake for her, even though she's fought every damn 115 pounder in strawweight history. This is actually a fresh matchup and one that makes all the sense in the world. Give me the number 13 Angela Hill versus the number 8 ranked Amanda Hebos, who's coming off of a loss in the first fight night of the year to Mackenzie Dern. Next up is Gabriel Bonfim, who had one of the most convincing performances of the night for me as a fan and for my feelings toward a fighter on this card, because albeit I loved watching Gabriel Bonfim fight, I mean, after all, he's 17-1 now with 16 finishes, 13 of those by submission, only 27 years old, but we saw him lose to Nicholas Dalby. We saw him have a not-so-memorable fight against Angelosa. I felt that he could still have some fun potential, but maybe not reach what we felt back when he was on the Contender Series in 2022. But this performance at UFC Vegas 102 against Khaos Williams, this was his coming out party, because not only does he get the submission and showcase his amazing jiu-jitsu skills, but en route to getting that submission, which put Khaos Williams to sleep on the canvas in the second round with 2 seconds left, Gabriel Bonfim looked better on the feet than Khaos Williams, picked him apart with a jab, looked technical, looked precise, looked powerful, and didn't let Khaos Williams get an inch of momentum in this fight. This was a big win for Gabriel Bonfim, and not only a big win, but a fantastic performance. And last but not least, we talk about the brother of Johnny Walker, Valter Walker, who improved to 13-1 in his professional career. 9 of his 13 victories are by way of stoppage. He is only 27 years old, and he did it with a heel hook submission over the number 15 ranked heavyweight in the world, Don'Tale Mayes. A heel hook submission. In the heavyweight division, back-to-back heel hooks in the heavyweight division. Name me someone else in this weight class over the course of the 30-plus year history of the UFC that has done that. You might not be able to find one at all, maybe even at any weight class. And not only is it coming from a heavyweight in Valter Walker, but it's coming from a very lean-looking heavyweight Valter Walker, who they said on the broadcast, I believe, dropped 13 pounds in between fights. He looked very fit, very muscular, very in shape. And if he's doing this, heel hooking other heavyweights, look out for Valter Walker. Being the brother of Johnny, already has a big name, has finishing capabilities, only 27 years old, not even in his prime yet. It won't take many more wins before Valter Walker is amongst the creme de la creme of the big boys. So that is it for the UFC Vegas 102 recap. Be sure to let me know in the comments below your biggest takeaways, your thoughts on the middleweight division, and what you think of all the other big winners and even some of the losers throughout the remainder of this fight night card. If you enjoyed this recap, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Every single week I recap the most meaningful results from every card. Heading into each weekend, I break down and discuss the biggest fights and best storylines, and I give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platform where every Monday and Friday podcast episodes release on Spotify, Apple, and more. Have a great week, and I will see you in the next video.